The cold morning pressed against the cave opening like a living thing, seeping into every crack and crevice. Frost clung to the rocks, and the air smelled sharp, carrying the distant scent of the forest beyond. Cora stirred, the rough fur of her blanket scraping her skin as she lifted herself from the cold stone floor. Her breath formed misty clouds in front of her face as she looked around at the tribe still sleeping, their faces etched with fatigue and worry. The fire had died down hours ago, leaving nothing but glowing embers and the faint scent of smoke. Outside, the forest lay silent, but Cora knew better than to trust silence. The footprints of giant predators, both human and animal, had been discovered near the river the day before. Her tribe, though resilient, had never faced anything like this. She touched the side of her brother's face gently, feeling the warmth of his skin against her fingers. Even in this harsh world, these small connections mattered. Reminders of why survival was more than instinct, it was about protecting those you loved. Cora stepped out into the pale light, her bare feet numb against the frost-hardened ground. She moved carefully, scanning the forest for signs of movement. Each branch that snapped underfoot made her heart leap. Birds called in the distance, and the low rumble of a mammoth herd echoed from across the valley. Survival was about patience, awareness, and respect for the dangers that surrounded them. The trees swayed in the cold wind, whispering warnings in a language only the forest seemed to understand. The hunt had been difficult, food was scarce, and the giant human creatures, taller, faster, and smarter than Cora's people, had begun encroaching on the territories that had once been safe. She remembered the footprints she had seen just yesterday, enormous impressions in the snow that dwarfed her own hands. They were not alone. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next movement, the next sign of life. Cora returned to the cave, crouching low to avoid the sharp eyes of the elders. She could see the worry etched into every face. Her mentor, an old hunter with scars that told stories of past battles, met her gaze. A silent understanding passed between them. Words were unnecessary. Danger did not require explanations. The tribe had survived storms, predators, and harsh winters before. But something in the way the shadows moved yesterday made her heart beat faster than it had in years. As the day wore on, Cora gathered the young hunters, teaching them how to read the snow, how to track the movements of animals, and how to sense the presence of the giant humans before they were seen. Their movements were clumsy at first, but Cora's patience was unwavering. She told them stories not just of hunting, but of resilience, of past elders who had led the tribe through impossible times. Each story was a thread in a tapestry that reminded them who they were and why survival mattered. By mid-afternoon, the tension grew unbearable. Small groups of the tribe ventured out to forage, their eyes scanning constantly, ears attuned to every sound. Cora's brother, curious and brave, wandered a little too far. A snap of a branch, a shadow gliding between trees, her heart jumped. But she forced herself to remain calm. Panic was deadly. She crept forward, her senses sharpened by years of survival, and found him kneeling by a patch of frozen berries, oblivious to the danger that lurked near. Relief washed through her, only to be replaced by a new worry. How long could they hide from creatures that hunted them not just for food but for sport? Night fell with a weight that pressed down on the tribe. They gathered in the cave once more, closer this time, bodies pressed together for warmth. The embers from the fire glowed weakly, throwing shadows against the walls, and Cora's mind replayed the footprints, the signs, the distant eyes watching them from the darkness. Sleep came fitfully, and when it did, it was haunted by dreams of towering figures and long, empty forests. Then, from the mouth of the cave, a faint sound carried a crunch of snow, the subtle shift of a shadow against the trees. Cora's eyes snapped open. She held her breath, listening, heart hammering in her chest. Another sound, closer this time, and the realization hit her like ice. The giant humans were here. They were no longer just shadows in the forest. They were hunters, and her tribe was their prey. She felt the weight of every life in the cave on her shoulders, the children, the elders, the weak, the brave. Cora's hand found her brother's, gripping it tightly. The tribe stirred, sensing her tension, her awareness. Outside, the wind carried the distant sound of a horn, strange and low, a call that spoke of dominance, of territory claimed. Forest, once a place of survival and quiet beauty, had become a trap, and there was nowhere to run. Every instinct screamed to flee, to hide, but Cora knew that alone, her people would not survive. Together, though battered, frightened, and weary, they had a chance. And Cora, though young, understood that this was the moment that would define the tribe as fate. Either they would endure or they would vanish like footprints in the snow. The night deepened, and with it came the shadows. Cora pressed herself against the cave wall, listening to the soft steps of the approaching hunters. The fire's glow flickered across her face, and in that flickering light, she made a silent vow. No matter the cost, she would protect her tribe. She would face the hunters. She would fight. She would survive. And as the shadow of the first giant human fell across the entrance, the cave seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the story of survival to unfold. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. Dawn broke with a pale, trembling light that seeped into the cave, brushing across the frost-lined floor. Cora's eyes opened before anyone else stirred, alert to the silence that had settled like a weight over the forest. The night had been long and filled with restless whispers, shadows that seemed to move even when there was no wind. Outside, the giant humans had vanished, leaving only the faint impressions of their enormous footprints pressed into the soft snow, a reminder that the danger was patient, relentless, and nearby. Cora rose, careful not to wake the children, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, biting at her skin, yet every sense was alive with the awareness of what could come. Tracks of other animals crisscrossed the snow mammoths, wolves, even a saber-toothed catbutt. None of them carried the same weight as the prints left by Thalos and his hunters. Her stomach tightened. Each step she took through the frozen forest felt like walking on the edge of a blade. She returned to the cave and gathered a few of the young hunters, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. She showed them how to move silently, how to listen to the smallest noises, a branch bending under weight, a bird startled from its perch, the whisper of distant water. Cora spoke little, but her gestures were clear, precise. Fear was necessary, she knew, but it could not paralyze them. Survival demanded discipline, strategy, and courage beyond what anyone could imagine. By mid-morning they ventured into the forest, moving carefully between the trees, hiding in the shadows. Cora's brother trailed close, struggling to match her calm, fluid movements. She noticed the tension in his small shoulders, the quick glance toward every sound. He had survived before, yes, but he had never seen predators like these. Humans, taller, stronger, and smarter than anyone in their history. Their presence alone twisted the forest into something alien, dangerous. The forest itself seemed aware of their plight. Every branch that creaked above sounded like a warning. The distant roar of a mammoth herd shook the frozen ground beneath their feet. Cora's heart thumped, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that any wrong move could lead to death. They stopped near a stream to drink, watching the icy water swirl. Even this moment of quiet brought no comfort. Cora's mind was alive with calculations, predictions, and the endless what-ifs that plagued those who lived on the edge of survival. Suddenly, a rustle in the trees. Cora froze, her body low to the ground. The young hunters imitated her, instinct taking hold before thought. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement, shadows slipping between trunks, too large and deliberate to be ordinary animals. The scent of smoke reached her, faint but unmistakable, and she knew then that the giant humans had returned, watching, waiting. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic would get them killed. Hours passed like this, each one stretching impossibly long. The group moved with cautious precision, avoiding open spaces, using the terrain to their advantage. Cora led them through hidden paths, small caves, and dense underbrush, teaching them survival not only with words but by example. She encouraged them silently, pressing her hand to a frightened shoulder, offering small nods that said, "You are stronger than you think." Fear had to be tempered with hope, or it would consume them. Evening approached, and the cold became harsher. Cora spotted the signs: first broken branches, flattened grass, and subtle footprints that led away from their trail. Thalos' group was tracking them, relentless as wolves, yet clever, covering their tracks and trying to anticipate the Neanderthals' movements. Cora's stomach twisted. Every decision mattered, and one mistake could mean death for everyone she loved. Then came the sound that froze her blood, a low, haunting horn, unfamiliar and chilling. The young hunters shrank behind her as the call echoed across the trees. It was not the sound of animals. It was a signal of predators, marking territory, asserting dominance, and sending a warning that the forest itself seemed to acknowledge. Cora clenched her teeth. They were being hunted not for sustenance alone, but for sport. Her tribe's very existence was a challenge to be erased. As darkness fell, they returned to a hidden cave, exhausted bodies trembling with cold and fear. Cora pressed close to the children, wrapping them in furs and whispering what little comfort she could. She thought of the missing hunters from earlier, wondering if they had survived the encounter, or if the forest had claimed them silently. She felt the weight of responsibility crush her shoulders, but she refused to let despair take hold. Leadership meant choosing hope when hope seemed impossible. That night, as the wind moaned across the valley, Cora kept watch at the entrance, eyes scanning the black shapes beyond the firelight. The shadows seemed to twist and move with their own life, every noise amplified by tension and memory. Her mind replayed the footprints, the horn, the fleeting glimpses of giant figures disappearing among the trees. She tightened her grip on the small spear in her hands. Tomorrow they would have to move again, to find food, safety, and perhaps a miracle. Sleep came only in short fragments, haunted by images of towering humans, clawed predators, and endless forests of white. Yet in the quiet moments, she imagined a future where her tribe could survive, where they could live another day, another season, another year. The forest was merciless, and the hunters were cunning, but Cora held a spark of determination, fragile yet unyielding, and as the first shadows of dawn crept across the frozen valley, she made a silent promise to herself, and to her people, she would not let them be taken without a fight, no matter the cost. The forest seemed alive with whispers, the wind carrying the faintest echo of distant movement. Cora's tribe had survived another night, but exhaustion weighed on them like a heavy stone. Muscles ached, stomachs grumbled, and every shadow seemed to hide predators. Cora stood at the edge of the cave, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She scanned the horizon, searching for signs of the giant humans who had tracked them relentlessly, knowing they would strike again. The forest had become a trap, and each decision could mean life or death. Cora moved through the underbrush with careful, practiced steps, leading the younger hunters. She demonstrated how to step lightly on frozen leaves, how to follow the tracks of smaller animals for food, and how to read the subtle signs that spoke of danger. Broken branches, flattened grass, disturbed snow. She taught them silently, with gestures and glances, because any sound could betray their presence. Fear was constant, but she had to temper it with courage. If the tribe sensed panic, they would not survive another encounter. By mid-morning, the first test of their skills arrived. A saber-toothed cat, massive and silent, emerged from the shadows, eyes glinting in the frost. The young hunters froze, paralyzed with terror, but Cora's calm presence steadied them. With precise movements, she guided them to a hidden ledge, whispering instructions that they barely understood but followed instinctively. The cat prowled, sniffing the air, then disappeared into the forest as suddenly as it had appeared. Relief washed over the tribe, but Cora knew this encounter was only a small taste of the dangers awaiting them. As they moved deeper into the forest, signs of Thalos' group appeared again. Tracks were fresher, marks on trees showed attempts to corner them, and faint smoke from distant fires confirmed their pursuit. Cora's heart tightened, but she forced herself to focus. She could not afford panic, not now. Every thought, every action had to be precise. The tribe had survived by reading the forest, by understanding its creatures, and by relying on one another. Now, more than ever, their unity was their only weapon. The afternoon was spent setting traps, simple yet clever mechanisms that might slow the humans or give them a chance to escape. Cora showed the tribe how to sharpen sticks into spears, how to create barriers with fallen trees, and how to use the natural terrain to their advantage. Each lesson was fraught with tension, the shadow of Thalos' hunters never far away. Yet amidst the fear, small moments of warmth appeared. Laughter when a trap worked, whispered encouragements, and the soft bond between Cora and her younger brother, who clung to her guidance like a lifeline. Night fell with a darkness that felt almost tangible, pressing against the tribe as they huddled in a hidden cave. The wind carried distant howls, the rustle of unseen animals, and the faint crunch of snow that made every ear strain for recognition. Then came the unmistakable sound of human voices, low and deliberate, signaling the hunter's approach. Cora gripped her spear, knuckles white, feeling the weight of every life in the cave. She had known this confrontation would come, but anticipation did not make it easier. Fear twisted in her chest, but she did not show it. The tribe needed a leader, and she would not fail them. The first clash was sudden and violent. Thalos' group burst through the trees, their enormous figures casting long shadows over the snow. Cora and the tribe reacted instantly, arrows flying, spears thrust with precision, born of desperation. Screams echoed, snow stained with blood, and the forest became a whirlwind of chaos. Cora fought with everything she had, her mind sharp, her body moving with fluid grace honed by years of survival. She could hear the children's frightened cries, the shouts of young hunters, and the battle raged around her. In the midst of the chaos, one of the tribe's strongest hunters, a friend and mentor to Cora, was struck down. The sight tore through her heart, grief threatening to consume her, but she forced it aside. Survival demanded focus. She led the remaining group through a hidden path, using the forest's shadows to escape the immediate danger. Every step was a fight against exhaustion, fear, and the cold that gnawed at their bones. By dawn, only a fraction of the tribe had survived. They huddled together near a frozen river, bodies trembling, eyes wide with shock and sorrow. Cora knelt beside her brother, holding him close, feeling the fragile warmth of his body against her own. Tears streaked her face, and for the first time she allowed herself to mourn not just the loss of her friends, but the fragility of life itself. Yet, even in grief, determination burned. They had survived this night, and if they could survive the night, perhaps they could survive another day. The forest around them was silent, almost reverent, as if acknowledging the struggle that had unfolded. Cora gazed at the horizon, where the pale light of dawn brushed against the frost-covered trees. Somewhere beyond the river, beyond the shadow of the mountains, lay hope. She could not promise safety, but she could promise vigilance, courage, and the will to keep moving forward. The giant humans might be relentless, but Cora's tribe was unbroken, their hearts still beating, still connected, still alive. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the frozen river, Cora made a vow not just to survive, but to protect, to fight, and to ensure that the stories, the love, and the memory of her people would endure, even in a world that seemed determined to erase them. The struggle was far from over, but the fire within her, the fire within the tribe, burned brighter than the shadow of fear that pursued them. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. The first light of dawn stretched across the frozen valley, soft and pale, brushing the snow with the promise of warmth. Cora's body ached from the relentless journey through the forest, every muscle heavy with exhaustion, but she refused to give in. Around her, the surviving members of her tribe stirred, their eyes wary but alert, each one carrying the scars of the battles fought and the losses endured. The forest, though quieter than the night before, still held the echoes of danger shadows that moved just beyond the corner of vision, and the ever-present sense of being watched. Cora led them carefully through the valley, choosing paths that would avoid the open plains where the giant humans might be tracking them. Every step was deliberate, guided by knowledge born of years of reading the land, understanding the wind, the trees, and the subtle signs left by animals and humans alike. The younger members of the tribe followed her closely, eyes wide but trusting, clinging to her strengths as a lifeline. Her brother walked beside her, silent and watchful, learning each movement, each cautious step, absorbing the lessons that survival demanded. They discovered remnants of other Neanderthal groups' stone tools left behind, small fires long extinguished, carvings etched into the walls of hidden caves. The signs told stories of survival, of people who had faced similar trials and endured. Cora knelt to examine the carvings, tracing the lines with her fingers, feeling a connection to those who had walked the land before her. There was sorrow there, yes, but also hope, proof that even in a world of relentless danger, life found a way to continue. The tribe set up a temporary camp near a frozen river that cut through the valley, its waters glinting in the morning light. Cora taught the young hunters how to fish through holes in the ice, how to identify safe plants and roots, and how to move quietly in case the giant humans were nearby. Even in this fragile peace, vigilance was necessary. Every sound, every shadow could signal the return of the hunters who had taken so much from them. That evening, as the sky turned gold and pink, Cora gathered the tribe near the riverbank. They were fewer than before, each survivor carrying the weight of loss, yet their faces held determination. She spoke softly, using the few words their language allowed, but her meaning was clear. They were not defeated, they had endured, and their story would continue. Tears were shed for those who had been lost, and hands were clasped in comfort, a reminder that the bond between them was stronger than fear, stronger than the predators that stalked the forest. As night fell, the first stars began to glimmer overhead. Cora sat with her brother on a small rise, watching the sky reflect on the frozen river. The wind was gentler now, carrying the scent of pine and the faint warmth of distant fires. She reflected on the journey, the battles, the fear, the courage, and the small moments of beauty that had persisted amidst the terror. Each struggle had shaped them, each loss had strengthened their resolve, and each act of bravery had illuminated the path forward. From the shadows at the edge of the valley, Cora glimpsed movement figures watching, perhaps Thalos humans, perhaps others, but she did not feel fear. The tribe had learned, adapted, and survived, and in that survival lay their greatest power. They were more than prey. They were a living testament to resilience, to the endurance of a people who refused to vanish without leaving a mark on the world. Cora's heart swelled with quiet pride as she looked at her people. She imagined a future where the lessons of survival would be passed to the next generation, where knowledge, culture, and memory would endure even when the world seemed against them. She pressed her hand gently against her brother's, feeling the pulse of life, the spark of hope. This was what mattered, not just to survive, but to live fully, to love, to remember, and to teach others to do the same. As the moon rose above the valley, casting silver light across the snow. Cora whispered a silent vow to those who had fallen and those who remained. They would continue, they would endure, and they would honor the past by surviving the present. The forest was still vast, the danger still real, but within her and within the tribe burned a fire that no shadow could extinguish. And for the first time in many nights, Cora allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing that the dawn of survival had arrived, fragile yet unstoppable, carrying with it the hope of all those who walked before, and all those yet to come. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel.